Money FM 89.3. Best of breakfast. Mind your business. Only on Money FM 89.3.
It is time for Mind Your Business. I'm Imad Akhtar along with Audrey Seek. Now, as more businesses in Asia turn to AI to drive financial decisions, from real-time reporting to risk analysis, there is growing excitement around its potential. A report by McKinsey Global Institute estimates that across the global banking sector alone, Gen AI could add between 200 and 340 billion US dollars in value annually, largely through increased productivity.
Yeah, that's a huge number, but there are some challenges, right? Smart data doesn't just magically organize itself and start making decisions. So how do you make sure AI is helping and not hindering? How do you turn messy, scattered information into something that actually powers decision making?
That's correct. To find out more, we have in the studio Kunal Anand, who's the Chief Innovation Officer at F5. Good morning, sir.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here with you both.
It's great to have you on, Kunal. So let's start big here. You know, everyone is saying AI is, to quote, redefining finance. But what does that actually look like in practice? How is it changing the day-to-day for financial institutions and their customers?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of lenses that you've already highlighted around productivity. You know, I think the first bit is when you look at banking and finance right now, there are a lot of organizations that are trying to leverage it to improve costs or improve efficiency. So we've seen a massive increase in things like chatbots. I loved the conversation earlier about the Singlish chatbot. It'd be pretty wild, like if there was like a Singlish chatbot that was like giving you financial advice.
Yeah.
That'd be pretty awesome. I'll use that to practice my Singlish, I promise. But the key thing is we see a lot of people going down that direction. So let's say you are a customer and you log into your banking portal. You can now engage with the chatbot to give you an understanding of what your balances look like, what your spending habits look like. And then on the business side, we've seen a lot of organizations now leverage that technology specifically to make better decisions. So we've seen it in like risk underwriting, where people will use AI to understand what the risk profile is if they wanted to lend someone money. We've seen people now use it for portfolio analytics and insights and trading as well. So it's all over the place in finance.
So why should customers come to F5? What do you guys offer that other AI vendors in the space don't? Because there's been a proliferation of competitors.
Yeah, look, in our world, and just a quick thing on F5, we're focused on helping companies deliver and secure their most critical digital experiences. And that would take the form of things like applications, AI agents, AI chatbots, etc. And we believe that right now is probably the most interesting time. You know, in the last decade, we've seen this massive wave of digital transformation where organizations went from these large lumbering data centers to cloud. And now with AI, there's just even more complexity going around. And what we're able to do as an organization is kind of help simplify and reduce that toil that companies have with respect to managing risk across all these different environments and making it easier, just fundamentally make it easier to understand what is going on in their complex, crazy estates.
Yeah, so F5 has a pretty global presence, but if we're looking at just APAC here in our zone here, SMEs make up a whopping 98% of businesses, and they employ about half of the workforce. So what are the specific, hurdles that small businesses face when trying to make better use of their data?
Yeah, I would say number one, a lot of small businesses don't know where all their data is. So that's the huge unlock, is just kind of understanding what is where. Number two is when it comes to unlocking, AI models, like very sophisticated models like ChatGPT, you need to be able to supply your data to those models. And I think a lot of SMEs haven't quite figured that out yet. So they need a lot of help and support. And then the third issue I think that a lot of people have is around governance and security of data, specifically in APAC. And look, I've been coming to Singapore for almost 25 years, pretty much every year for 25 years. And what I really love about Singapore is the pragmatism that the government has had around new technologies. And for example, around AI, I think the government's doing an absolutely incredible job of getting organizations here like ramped up and ready to go to use AI, but doing it in a secure manner. And it's so different from a lot of other countries where they're just sort of speed running and trying to implement AI as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, you talked about SMEs just now, but you also have a number of Fortune 500 companies in your portfolio of clients. Which industries do you cut across, or are you industry agnostic?
I think we're industry agnostic. Yeah. So financial services, banking, government, healthcare, retail, telcos. Cybersecurity is cutting across everything. A hack is a hack.
Any use cases you can share with us?
Yeah, so there's a couple of examples.
Yep.
Specifically around AI, we're helping with delivery, and that means like ensuring that these environments are working as they should for very large AI clusters. I mean, one of the largest AI clusters in the world is being fronted by our technology as an example. Then when I look at things specifically here in APAC, with now the proliferation of AI and more interesting experiences, we're able to deliver and secure many of those, whether they're traditional applications or APIs.
Yeah, so we know that Fortune 500 companies can definitely afford this kind of support. But going back to the SMEs for a second, budget and complexity can be huge barriers. So is it actually possible for these smaller companies to implement smarter data strategies without breaking the bank?
I think so. And I think over time, I think we may see even a bigger threat, I would say, to the larger enterprises with AI. And to kind of flip it around a little bit, we were talking about agents earlier. Agents are going to make smaller organizations or these SMEs more productive using less resources. And so I think that if you're a larger enterprise today and you're not leveraging AI right now, or you're not looking at these agents, you run into this crazy scenario or situation because a smaller, more nimble organization can move faster than you. The question is, can they do it in a more secure manner? And can they do it faster than a bigger company figuring out how to be leaner and more agile with this technology?
Yeah, speaking of secure, I want to touch on some of the risks of deploying Gen AI too quickly without a sound governance or data strategy. How can a single flawed AI-generated report cause million-dollar missteps or compliance failures? Is there really a need for a chief AI officer?
Yeah, so I think right now, starting with compliance is probably the most important thing. And that means, figuring out where all your stuff is. So I think it was relatively recently, Microsoft was talking about shadow IT. And they mentioned some crazy statistic that 80% of IT is shadow. Yeah, I know, it's crazy, right? That means that the organization doesn't know about 80% of some of these technologies that are being used. Now, think about AI. There's so many people inside of these massive companies that bring their own AI models into the workforce. The biggest issue I think that everyone's going to have is around data, because data is sort of the crown jewel of every organization. So what happens when you have an employee who's sending, sensitive financial data within their organization to something like a ChatGPT? And by the way, I've had many conversations with CISOs, those are security officers, or CIOs, information officers at companies globally, even in APAC. And that is coming up more and more now, which is I have employees that are sending sensitive financial information or sensitive data to these AI models without the organization even realizing that it's happening.
And do you think that these employees actually realize that they have done something that could be risky to the company?
That is the billion-dollar question, right? And I don't think it's people acting nefariously at all. I think these are people who are really busy. I mean, if you kind of look at the way the world has progressed over the last few years, coming on the other side of the global pandemic, I think we're just busier now. Things are moving faster now in AI. People are expected to respond faster and move quickly. So it's not people acting maliciously. I think it's just people trying to keep up with all the information and the information overflow that's kind of coming towards them. And so unfortunately, they're just not thinking about the risk that they're posing to the overall business.
I just want to touch on something you mentioned earlier on in this conversation. You've been coming to Singapore for the last 25 years, you said, and Singapore is F5's biggest office in the APAC region. What are some unique cybersecurity or innovation challenges that you've seen in the Asia-Pacific region that differ from the US or Europe?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I find really odd is things like data protection is not at all where I thought it would be. Like, for instance, I think Singapore leads in APAC, no question, around data protection. But I'm really surprised that when I look at other countries, specifically in this region, many countries seem to not care about data security or data governance, as an example. And then when I think about AI security, I feel like many other countries are just sort of trying to figure out what AI means, but Singapore is way ahead. And so I would say a massive +1 to Singapore. I'm not saying it just because I'm here. I really believe it. And you can see it, right? Where when Singapore introduces something like a new legislation or compliance around security, Australia follows, which is really fascinating, and other countries in the region tend to follow. An interesting statistic or thing that I've noticed is take a country like Japan as an example, you would sort of think that they'd be more on the forefront regarding things like data security, data governance, especially in the realm of AI. They're one of the laggards, as an example, right? And it's such a different thing, and I don't know how much of it is customs from a specific country, beliefs, and culture as you go from country to country. In some places, like in the U.S., it's somewhat unforgiving about data breaches, as an example. And so for me, it's a little weird, right, when you travel around the world and you see this sort of disproportionate sort of take around security and governance.
Yeah, so Kunal, you dropped some shocking facts today, some standout insights. We know that F5 recently released its 2025 State of Application Strategy Report. Do you have any more standout insights to share from that? And what do you think is holding businesses or, countries back from making the most of AI?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you one that's in that report that blew my mind, which is more than 90% of individuals working at a company are okay with AI operating on their behalf.
On their behalf?
On their behalf.
Okay.
So if I'm a 10,000 person organization, 9,000 people are okay with AI doing their work for them. And that could be scheduling meetings, that could be analyzing a report, that could be sending an email, who knows. But they're okay with that, which means that this sort of autonomous future with agents, interacting with other agents, that is coming very quickly. And that surprised me the most. Really, really shocked me. I thought we were going to see maybe 50-50 at best, but to see 90% of an organization, at least the folks that we surveyed, saying that they've leaned in so much into AI, or they're willing to let AI take control over their day-to-day. I don't know what that means societally. I don't know what that means culturally for all of us, right?
Yeah. I mean, it makes you wonder whether we are outsourcing our agency to technology far too soon for our own good. I'm extrapolating from your LinkedIn page here where you say at F5, I'm focused on solving the ball of fire.
Yeah.
Can you explain what you mean by this?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to the big challenges that people have right now, which is in this hybrid and multi-cloud world, the average large enterprise has more than 6 different environments that they're in. And that means different cloud providers, different data centers. SMEs have multiple environments that they're living in as well. And then you think about the fact that there's this increase in cyber attacks. The sheer number of cyber attacks have quadrupled over the last decade. So we have more applications. We have more of these rich experiences that we want to deliver to customers globally. And then you think about the compounding risk of cybersecurity. And now I'm going to do my best sort of Salt Bay here. Folks can't see it. And you sprinkle a little AI magic right now on top of it. And so I think the big question is you kind of compound all of that. That's what we call the ball of fire, which is this complexity, this mess that every organization, big, small, doesn't matter. They all have to untangle this or extinguish the ball of fire.
It sounds like a ball that no one wants to touch.
I think a lot of people...
I'll just pass the buck on to someone else.
And I think in certain places and some organizations that do turn a blind eye to this, for sure. There's some organizations that'll be like, no, that'll be someone else's problems to solve, or something else will take care of it. And I think what people are just missing is how fast things are moving. As consumers, right? When we hear about there's a new ChatGPT model or there's a new AI thing to go and play with, can you imagine what enterprises are going through right now? Where you've got CEOs and other people on the board saying, no, we need to lean into AI. We need to use more of this stuff right now. The complexity is just skyrocketing in all these companies.
Yeah, and it's moving at a lightning fast pace, as you said. So what is one simple step a small business can take maybe today to make their data smarter? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I would say number one, I would think it's just data inventory. Understand where all your data and all your information is. AI is getting smarter. It's getting faster. I believe that there's a future coming where these sort of world scale, very large models will be able to run on our phones, will be able to run on our laptops. And in order to get the most out of those models, it's going to be combining it with the data that we have. So I would tell anyone, small business, large business, it starts with data, understanding where that is and putting the right safeguards around it.
Final question. You've held multiple C-suite roles in various companies within the tech space. You've also had leadership roles at organizations like NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab and BBC Worldwide.
Yeah.
What would you say is your leadership philosophy, and how has that contributed to the success of the business that you are currently helming as Chief Innovation Officer, F5?
So you brought up JPL. A little fun fact because of the topic here and for the great work that you all do. My degree is actually in finance.
Wow.
So I had a choice when I was coming out of college to go on Wall Street, and I had a job offer to go there versus the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And to directly answer your question, why I picked JPL was the curiosity, the sort of curious nature in me of wanting to learn something totally brand new. You know, I studied things like derivatives and options in school. And for me, like, I love math and I love all of that. But there was nothing that was pulling me into it. Versus in technology, I've always felt that draw. So I lead with wanting to drive curiosity across the organization, which is right now, we live in the most incredible time. You know, I went to school, a business school, and they didn't teach programming class. The way I learned how to program was literally my now wife, then girlfriend, would take me to a Barnes & Noble bookstore.
Get out.
And I didn't have a laptop. So I would sit down with a steno pad and a pen. I would read programming books, and I'd handwrite C code.
Very old school.
Old school, like before Google existed, before these AI models existed. I think right now, if you have a curious nature and you just want to learn more, we have so much abundance right now. And I just feel like we all need to take more advantage of that, whether it's information that's available, pushing ourselves to learn more. And the last bit is just rounding it out is intellectual honesty. I really care about working from first principles, like understanding how things work at its core, and then just being honest about really, do you get it or do you not get it? And it's okay if you don't get it, ask AI. It'll teach you.
Ask AI. Yeah, well, things are moving lightning fast, and it's clear that smarter data management isn't just about collecting more data. It's about knowing where it is, making it work harder and safer, especially as businesses of all sizes step into this AI era. Kunal, it was such an eye-opener chatting with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. We'll play tennis next time, Ahmad.
We will play tennis. You should have said it as an AI opener.
An AI.
Oh, geez.
How did I let that slip away?
Yep, Kunal Anand is the Chief Innovation Officer at F5. Stay with Money FM 89.3.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.